The storm split the sky like glass. Rain struck the cobblestones hard enough to rattle my bones, though I barely felt the cold. My hands were numb from clutching the lantern, my nails biting into the iron handle. The flame inside was no flame at all, it churned like water, a swirling tide of blue-green light. Faces pressed against the glass, pale and desperate, whispering with voices too thin for mortal throats. They knew my name. Leyla. Leyla. Behind me, the villagers had gathered, torches raised high, though not one of them dared to come closer. Their eyes shone with hatred and fear, the same way they always looked at me, but tonight there was something sharper beneath it. A hunger. They wanted me to give it up. They wanted me to fail. The air grew heavy, thick with the taste of ash and damp earth. Then the shadows on the stones shifted, curling like smoke into a woman's shape, tall and terrible, her body veiled in black. Her eyes burned with the same blue fire that swirled in the lantern. The witch. Her voice cracked across the storm like a whip. That lantern is mine. My heart jolted. The faces inside the glass screamed louder. And in the cacophony, I heard one voice clearer than the rest. A voice I had not heard since I was a child. Don't give it back, Leyla. It was my mother's voice. I should tell you about the village before I tell you about the lantern. Imagine a place where the earth itself groans. Where every house is built not only on stone but on bone, the skulls of the forgotten cemented into the foundations. They stare at you with hollow sockets whenever you walk past, as if they are daring you to stay. Or warning you to run. That was the village of Drauvel. My prison, my home. We lit lanterns all year round, not for warmth, not for beauty, but to keep the dead away. At least, that's what the elders told us. When I was little, I used to ask why the skulls were in the walls if lanterns were enough to keep spirits at bay. The elders never answered. They just told me to hush and pray to the hollow saints. But no prayer ever silenced the whispers in this place. Not that anyone cared what I thought. To the villagers, I was nothing but witch spawn. My mother had been dragged into the forest when I was 7, accused of sorcery after a drought withered the fields. I still remembered her face as they tied her hands, not fear, not rage, but something harder. A terrible resignation. That was the last I ever saw of her. From that day, I belonged to no one. My father turned his back on me. The neighbors spat when I passed. Children pelted me with rotten apples, chanting witch spawn until my ears burned. I learned to keep my head down. To take what scraps were left. To disappear when they were in the mood to hurt me. But on the night of All Hallows' Eve, when the veil thinned and the dead were said to walk, it was impossible to hide. The villagers paraded through the crooked streets, each carrying a carved pumpkin with a stub of candle burning inside. Their faces twisted in the flickering light, masks of fear pretending to be joy. They marched toward the chapel square, chanting the old hymns meant to ward off the witch who haunted the woods. I stood at the edge of the crowd, hungry, hollow, my stomach gnawing at itself. They didn't want me there, but the square was the only place with food left unattended during the procession. So I lingered in the shadows, waiting for a chance. Look at her. A girl's voice, sharp with scorn. I turned just in time to see Marin, the baker's daughter, sneer at me over her candlelit pumpkin. Her eyes are too dark. Just like her mother's. Another boy laughed. Careful, Marin, she'll curse your crops if you look too long. Their laughter crackled like fire. I clenched my fists. I wanted to shout that their crops had rotted long before I was born, that their prayers were worthless, that the witch was only feared because they fed her with blood. But I bit my tongue until it bled. Because deep down, I was afraid they were right. That night, as the villagers filled the square with chanting, I turned away and walked down the crooked path that led to the forest. The procession's light dimmed behind me, swallowed by fog. Something inside me had snapped. I was tired of being the scapegoat, the shadow, the victim. If I was cursed, if I truly carried the witch's blood in my veins, then I would prove it. I would find her. The forest loomed like a sea of teeth, its branches clawing at the sky. Every step felt like a dare. My heart pounded in my throat, but I pressed deeper, guided by a strange pull. The fog thickened. The wind stilled. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. That's when I saw it. The hut. It squatted in a clearing like some monstrous beast, half collapsed, with vines crawling through the roof. The timbers leaned at impossible angles, yet the structure held, as though bound together by stubborn will alone. And the candles. Dozens of them, perched along the windowsill, guttering with green flame that burned without smoke or heat. My skin prickled. Every story I had ever been told warned me to run. But my feet moved forward. I pressed my hand to the door, rough with splinters. It creaked open. The air inside was damp and heavy, thick with the smell of earth and ash. Herbs hung from the rafters in twisted bundles, their shadows swaying like corpses. A table stood at the center, its surface littered with bones, feathers, cracked jars. And on the table sat the lantern. It glowed faintly, pale as moonlight caught in water. But as I stepped closer, I saw it wasn't light at all. It was movement. A swirl of faces, men, women, children, flickering in and out like breath on glass. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. Until I touched it. Then the whispering began. Leyla. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My name. They knew my name. The faces pressed harder against the glass, their eyes wide with desperate longing. And though I couldn't understand their words, I felt the pull. A hunger. A plea. My breath came fast and ragged. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But something inside me, something I could not name, reached forward. My hand closed around the iron handle. The lantern was warm. Almost alive. The whispering grew louder. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel powerless. So I stole it. I tore the lantern from the table and ran. The forest roared to life around me. Branches whipped at my arms like claws. Roots coiled beneath my feet. The hut groaned as though it were alive, shrieking in protest. But I didn't stop. I clutched the lantern to my chest and burst from the trees, panting, my heart wild with something I couldn't name. The villagers wanted to call me cursed? Then cursed I would be. Because in my hands, I carried the proof. When I returned to the village, the procession was still underway. Jack-o'-lanterns glowed in every window, their crooked grins warped by the rain. Hymns rose from the square, but the words tangled in the wind, distorted into something dark. I stumbled down the muddy lane, clutching the lantern beneath my cloak. The voices inside had quieted, though I felt them like a heartbeat against my ribs. A pulse that wasn't mine. The first villager to see me was old Marn, the blacksmith. His eyes went wide, his jaw slack. What, where did you? He staggered backward, his hammer clattering into the mud. I pulled the lantern free, almost without meaning to. Its pale light spilled across the stones. Faces swam in the glass, mouths opening in silent cries. The hymn in the square faltered. Torches bobbed as villagers turned. Witch spawn, someone shouted. She's stolen the lantern. The words rippled through the crowd like fire. They came running, faces twisted with fear and rage. My heart lurched, I should have run, should have hidden, but my feet rooted to the ground. They closed in. Marin at the front, her pumpkin lantern held high like a shield. "Put it down, Leyla. That thing isn't yours." The whispers rose, curling around my thoughts like smoke. I couldn't make out the words, but they urged me to stand, to fight, to claim. My blood burned. No, the word tore from me before I could think. My grip tightened on the handle. "It's mine now." The mob surged. That's when it happened. The lantern flared. Shadows exploded outward, twisting across the stones like claws. Torches sputtered and died, plunging half the lane into darkness. Marin screamed, stumbling back. A door slammed shut on its own. The ground itself seemed to shiver. I stared, my chest heaving. I hadn't moved. I hadn't willed it. The lantern had answered for me. And the villagers knew it. "Cursed," someone whispered. "She's cursed. She carries the witch's flame." They backed away, their fury breaking into fear. Torches dipped. Faces shrank into the dark. No one dared come closer. Only one voice cut through the silence. My father's. He pushed through the crowd, his cloak soaked with rain, his face pale as bone. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Not since he turned me out of the house, saying it was better to starve in the alleys than rot his soul by sharing bread with me. Now his eyes locked on the lantern, then on me. "What have you done?" His voice was hoarse, trembling with something I couldn't name. I opened my mouth to answer, but the lantern spoke first. Not in words. In voices. A chorus rose from the glass, sharper, clearer than before. My name hissed and echoed, over and over. "Leyla. Leyla. Leyla." The villagers clapped their hands over their ears. Some dropped to their knees. But I heard them. Gods help me, I understood them. One voice cut through the others, fragile as silk. "Child, child of my blood." My blood froze. I knew that voice. Even softened by death, I knew it. My mother. I nearly dropped the lantern. My knees went weak. But before I could breathe her name, the voices swelled again, and the lantern pulsed with light so bright it burned their faces into my vision. I staggered back, clutching it to my chest. The crowd parted like water. Not one dared to touch me now. My father's lips moved, but no sound came. His eyes were wide with a horror I had never seen before. Not fear of me, but of recognition. And then I knew, he had always known. I turned and ran, their torches dimming behind me. The voices chased me into the night, whispering, weeping, calling me back into the dark. The storm broke before dawn. I lay awake on the floor of my shack, the lantern glowing faintly at my side. The roof leaked, the walls shuddered, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The voices inside the glass were a lullaby I couldn't escape, sometimes soft as breath, sometimes shrill enough to tear through my skull. I had stopped trying to sleep hours ago. The villagers wouldn't come for me tonight, I knew that much. Fear had frozen them where hatred had always driven them before. But fear is a brittle shield. When morning came, when the bravado of daylight returned, so would their rage. I told myself I should run. Take the lantern and flee the village forever. But where would I go? The world outside Drauvel was only whispers and rumors, and the forest was hers. A gust rattled the shutters. The lantern flared. My pulse quickened. The voices surged as one, rising into a wail so piercing I pressed my hands to my ears. The flame swelled, filling the room with a sickly green-blue glow. Then the shutters burst inward. Wind howled through the shack, flinging ash and dust into my eyes. I staggered back as the shadows stretched long across the floor. They bled together, twisting, reshaping, rising until they were no longer shadows at all. She stood before me. The witch. She was taller than any human should be, her body veiled in a gown of black that seemed woven from smoke itself. Her hair spilled wild and tangled down her shoulders, streaked with silver that shimmered in the lantern light. Her face was half hidden by shadow, yet her eyes burned, not with fire, but with the pale blue glow of the dead. When she spoke, her voice filled the room, low and cold and terribly certain. "That lantern is mine." My breath caught. I pressed back against the wall, clutching the handle until my knuckles whitened. The faces inside the glass pressed against the barrier, mouths opening soundlessly. She stepped closer. The floorboards did not creak beneath her weight, if she even had weight at all. "Give it back," she said. "And live." Her words slithered into my ears, tempting, almost kind. I wanted to believe her. To throw the cursed thing at her feet and beg her to leave me. But the lantern pulsed warm in my hands, almost like it was alive, almost like it knew. And the voices inside rose in protest. One whispered loudest of all. "Don't listen. Don't yield." My mother's voice again. My throat burned. Why do they know me? Why do they call my name? The witch tilted her head, her lips curving into something not quite a smile. "Because they are yours. Your blood. Your kin." I froze. "They were bound to me long ago," she continued. "For every harvest, for every child who survived the fever, for every roof that stood through the storm. The villagers made their bargain. They gave their dead to me." "No," I whispered. My pulse throbbed in my ears. "They said you stole them." Her laugh was soft and terrible, like the cracking of ice over a river. "Stole? No. They begged me. They came to me weeping. They bound their own. And when they tired of their guilt, they called it my curse." The storm outside roared. Thunder rattled the ground. I shook my head. "You're lying." Her eyes narrowed, and the air grew sharp with cold. "The lantern does not lie. Listen to it. It will tell you everything." I clutched it tighter, torn between terror and defiance. "You think they hate you because of what you are?" she asked, her voice lowering to a whisper that slithered into my bones. "No, child. They hate you because you remind them of their sins." Lightning split the sky. For a heartbeat the shack lit up white, and in that flash, I saw her face fully. She looked like me. Older, sharper, twisted by years and sorrow, but there was no mistaking it. Her cheekbones, her jawline. She could have been my blood. My stomach lurched. Her hand lifted, long and pale, her nails black as pitch. She extended it toward me. "Give it back, Leyla. Return it, and I will leave you to your miserable little life." The lantern burned hotter in my grip. The voices wailed. I drew a shuddering breath. No. For the first time, her expression shifted. Not anger. Not amusement. Something deeper. A flicker of pity. "Then listen well," she murmured. "The lantern always tells the truth. But truth will eat you alive." The shadows swallowed her then, folding her into nothing. The wind died. The lantern dimmed. And I was alone. Alone, with the voices of the dead still whispering my name. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the village damp and brittle, like the world had been half-washed clean but left streaked with mud. Smoke curled from the chimneys as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I carried the lantern at my side, shrouded in a ragged cloak, its weight dragging on me like an anchor. Every step to the square felt wrong, like walking into a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. The villagers were already there. Men gripping pitchforks, women clutching charms, children hiding behind their mothers' skirts. Eyes followed me like I was a fire spreading in their thatch. Their faces held no pity. Only hunger. At the center of the square, the elders stood in their gray cloaks, 7 of them lined like statues carved from old wood. Behind them, leaning heavily on a staff of oak, was my father. I froze. It had been years since I'd seen him this close. His hair, once black as mine, was streaked with white, his frame bent from years of labor, or guilt. He would not meet my gaze. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice booming over the hushed crowd. "Leyla, daughter of no one, child of the cursed bloodline. You stand before us, marked by the witch's hand. You carry her lantern, proof of your pact. Do you deny it?" The lantern pulsed at my side, faintly glowing, as if mocking me. The whispers pressed against my skull, urging me to speak. I lifted my chin, though my throat was dry. "I deny it. I made no pact. But you did." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. The elder stiffened. "Mind your tongue." "You gave them to her," I said, louder now, the words spilling before I could stop them. "The dead. The children. My mother." Gasps broke like waves. The crowd pressed back, fear flickering in their eyes. My father's hand tightened on his staff, but still he would not look at me. The elder sneered. "Blasphemy. Lies whispered to you by the witch herself. You are her mouthpiece. Her vessel." "No," I snapped, stepping forward, lantern raised. The glass shimmered, and faces pressed to the surface, pale, hollow-eyed, familiar. One among them stared out clearer than the rest. My mother. The crowd shrank back, some crossing themselves, others trembling in silence. "She told me," I cried, my voice breaking. "She said you begged her for safety, for harvest, for survival. You gave her our blood. You gave her me." The elder's face twisted, but his voice rang steady. "And would you have had us starve? Would you have seen the fever take every child in Drauvel? We did what was necessary. What was demanded." The words slammed into me harder than the storm winds. Necessary. Demanded. My mother's sacrifice, my life as an outcast, all neatly wrapped in their justifications. My eyes burned. You let her die. At last, my father looked at me. His gaze was hollow, his lips trembling. For a moment, I thought he might speak, confess, beg forgiveness. But instead, he lowered his head. "She asked me to," he whispered. The world tilted. My knees nearly buckled. The elder raised a hand. "Seize her. Take the lantern and cast her into the pyre. Let the witch come claim her, and let Drauvel be free of this curse." The villagers surged forward. I staggered back, clutching the lantern to my chest, the whispers rising into a scream. My mother's voice among them, sharper than all the rest. "Run." The mob closed in, their hands outstretched, their faces twisted by desperation and dread. My father did not move to stop them. And for the first time, I felt the lantern's fire leap from the glass into me, filling my veins with heat, with hunger, with power I did not understand. I raised it high. The voices roared. And the villagers faltered. The square became a pit of snarling faces, clawing hands, and shrill cries. Their fear sharpened them into beasts, their desperation twisting into rage. They surged toward me, ready to drag me to the pyre like kindling. I should have run. My mother's voice had begged it of me. But I couldn't. Not when the lantern burned so hot in my hands, not when the weight of every ghost within it pressed against my ribs, begging to be loosed. I lifted it high. The glass blazed with light, not green this time, but a furious blue-white that seared the eyes. The crowd screamed, stumbling back, shielding their faces. But the light wasn't meant for them. It was meant for what came next. The glass cracked. Once. Twice. Then it shattered. Flame without fire erupted, a torrent of burning souls streaming into the air like smoke made of flesh. Faces stretched and wailed, swirling into a storm above the square. Their cries split the sky, louder than thunder, deeper than any bell. The villagers dropped to their knees, shrieking prayers, clutching at each other in terror. But the ghosts did not fall upon them, not yet. They circled me, whirling, their hollow eyes fixed on mine. I staggered, choking on the cold that poured from them. My mother's voice rose among the cacophony, clear, commanding. Take it, Leyla. Take what they owe us. My breath tore ragged from my chest. I don't know how. The spirits surged through me. Agony ripped through my body as if every vein had been filled with lightning. My knees buckled, but I did not fall. I hovered, weightless, my cloak thrashing in the spectral storm. My eyes burned, and when I opened them, the world was nothing but shadows and fire. The mob screamed. Some tried to flee, but the dead were faster. They poured down from the sky in tendrils of light, grasping hands of smoke and bone, dragging villagers back by their ankles, their hair, their very shadows. Others were forced to kneel, mouths wrenched open by invisible fingers as the dead howled into them, filling their bodies with borrowed voices. The square became a nightmare, a theater of possession. The villagers' cries twisted into unfamiliar tones, their eyes flashing white-blue as spirits clung to them. Some fought it. Some welcomed it. All were changed. Through the chaos, my father stood rooted, his staff clutched in shaking hands. His face was ash-gray, his lips bloodless. But he did not flee. He only stared at me, no, through me, like he was seeing my mother reborn in fire. Leyla, he rasped, barely audible over the storm. What have you done? I wanted to scream at him. To say this was their doing, not mine. But my voice was not my own anymore. When I spoke, it was layered with countless others, my mother's chief among them. We have taken back what was stolen. The ground trembled. The pyre they had built for me, drywood stacked high, waiting for the match, burst into unnatural flame, blue and searing. The smoke carried no heat, only a suffocating cold that spread through the square. The elders collapsed, their gray cloaks igniting with ghost fire. Their bodies writhed, their mouths frothing with screams as the dead clawed their way into their skin. One by one, their eyes rolled white, their voices lost to the chorus. And still the lantern shards burned at my feet, glowing like embers, pulsing with hunger. The voices whispered inside me, urging me to claim more, the whole village, the forest, the world. I looked at my father. His eyes brimmed with tears. He did not beg. He did not run. He only whispered my name, brokenly, like a prayer or a curse. Leyla. For a heartbeat, the storm paused, waiting for my command. The choice was mine. The silence stretched, a single heartbeat before the storm chose its master. The villagers trembled, frozen between fight and flight, their eyes darting between me and the sky churning with the dead. My father's whisper still lingered in my ears, fragile as glass, Leyla. I could have turned away. I could have fled into the forest with the voices, let the village crumble under its own guilt. But the fire in my veins burned too deep. Their hatred had cut me all my life, their bargains had stolen my blood, and now their hands reached still to claim what was left of me. No more. I raised my arms. The storm obeyed. The dead descended like a tide, screaming through the air, their touch freezing, blistering, scouring. Villagers were plucked from the square like straw from a fire. They convulsed as the spirits poured into them, eyes glowing blue-white, mouths wrenched wide as other voices spoke through them. Some fell and never rose. Others became puppets, staggering, thrashing, their souls drowned beneath the weight of the ones they had betrayed. The pyre roared higher, its flames reaching skyward in a spire of ghost fire that painted the village in pale light. The houses groaned as their thatch caught, the smoke rising in unnatural colors, carrying the cries of the dead into the heavens. I stepped forward through the chaos. The ground froze beneath my feet. The villagers scattered, but there was no escape, every alley spilled with wraiths, every shadow sprouted hands of ash and bone. And still the voices chanted in me, a chorus of rage and justice. Take them all. The elders were the first to fall. Their gray cloaks writhed with fire, their mouths bursting with screams that were not their own. One tried to crawl toward me, arms outstretched, pleading. But before his lips could form words, the lantern's flame seized him whole, and he dissolved into smoke. The others followed, their bones cracking like dry branches, their souls spilling into the storm that whirled ever tighter around me. The crowd broke. Mothers clutched children, men dropped their weapons, all fled screaming toward the forest's edge. But the forest would not take them. The witch's shadow waited among the trees, her eyes gleaming pale in the distance, a witness to my harvest. And my father. He still stood, rooted to the square, his staff trembling in his hands. The firelight flickered in his eyes, reflecting my face, or perhaps hers, the witch's, my mother's, all blurred into one. Leyla, he croaked, his voice raw. Stop this. Please. The storm paused at my command, the ghosts hovering like 1,000 blades waiting to fall. My heart thundered, torn between fury and something dangerously close to grief. But then I remembered. His silence when they dragged my mother away. His lowered head when they named me cursed. His whisper, she asked me to. I lifted my hand. The storm shrieked. My father cried out as the spirits surged into him, tearing his staff from his grasp. His body convulsed, his back arched, and his eyes rolled white as the dead claimed him. For one instant, I thought I heard my mother's voice rise above the chorus, calling his name. Then he was gone, swallowed in the tide. The square was mine. No, the village was mine. I stood crowned in ghost fire, the storm whirling into a spiral above me, flames devouring wood and flesh alike. Drauvel was no longer a village but a pyre, its smoke a column rising into the black sky, its cries a hymn of ruin. And in the distance, I saw her, the witch, watching from the tree-lean, her face lit faintly by the flames. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She only inclined her head, as if acknowledging a successor. And then she was gone, leaving me to the ruin I had become. I stood alone in the ashes, lantern shards glowing faintly at my feet, and I knew one truth, sharp as a blade. I was no longer their outcast. I was their end. And so, when the wind howls through empty fields where Drauvel once stood, they say you can still hear the voices, hundreds of them, crying, laughing, whispering her name. If you listen too long, the lantern's curse may find you as well. But if you wish to walk further into shadows like these, stay close. There are more stories waiting, if you dare, so do not leave this place without marking your presence, without whispering your name into the dark. Like. Subscribe. Join us. Because the dead are always listening.